Welcome to the FedLife podcast with Dan Sipe from Serving Those Who Serve. In this podcast, Dan draws from years of financial experience to help federal employees overcome challenges that every Fed can relate to. Join us for this journey as we reach, teach, and serve to help you make the right financial decisions. Now, on to the show.
And hello and welcome to this episode of the FedLife podcast. I am your host, Dan Sipe. Additionally, I'm the branch manager here at Serving Those Who Serve and Lee Sipe and Associates. I will begin, as I always do, by saying thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen. And above all, thank you for your service to the country, to me, to everyone. You don't hear that enough. You'll always hear it here. Ed Zurndorfer is back with us once again. The guru is here as part of our ongoing mission to reach, teach, and serve you. If you're a regular listener, you know what comes next. At the outset, I need to say that the opinions of our guest, Ed Zurndorfer, are not the opinions of Raymond James of Serving Those Who Serve. And this podcast is presented for information only and is not intended to be taken as advice. All listeners should consult their personal advisors before taking any action. If you do not have a personal advisor, hit us up at Serving Those Who Serve. That's scwserve.com. We'll do our best to help you any way we can. And boy, howdy, do we have a big and important set of episodes. I would go so far as say, Ed, that every single Fed should listen to these and read your articles. And folks, I am talking about Ed's most recent article about milestones for age and service in your federal career. And I'll make a bet here. I'll bet a bunch of you know some of these. And maybe some folks know most, but I'm going to bet not too many people know all of these milestones that we're going to talk about. And they can be super important to you and your family, especially for you to get the most out of your federal benefits, which of course makes the most of your Fed life. And a quick reminder, be sure to subscribe to these podcasts and also our weekly serving. It's our best delivered to you each and every week. You will be able to do that as part of the YouTube channel here. So, Ed, this is a great article. So a quick reminder to everyone, be sure to subscribe to these podcasts and also to our weekly serving. It's our best delivered to you each and every week. You can see the opportunity to do that on this YouTube channel. So, Ed, this is a great article, and it illustrates pretty much from day one that there are important age and service milestones for Feds. So folks, I'm really going to task you with something. I need you, after you've listened to this, to share this with everybody, regardless of their time in service, especially the new kid in your office. So jumping in, Ed, you know, I was struck by the fact that the first milestones from your article begin as early as 18 months, and there are two of them. So what are they?
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Appreciate your kind words about the column. I had a very, very good time, I should say, composing that column, because I know it's going to be very helpful to all the federal employees out there. So let's go ahead and start with the first milestone, and that is regarding 18 months, 18 months of service. And one could be at any age, because we have to remember this is milestones for both age and service time. So in this case, it's 18 months. Someone could be any age. And the first milestone is that if an employee who's covered by FERS, and most are, has 18 months of service, that employee can file for what's called disability retirement. Disability retirement if they have 18 months of service. Disability retirement. Now, let me give them a heads up. To qualify for FERS disability retirement is not an easy task. First of all, you have to qualify for Social Security disability retirement, and that in itself is very difficult. But if one has a disability that they could qualify for Social Security disability benefits, they could, and they're a FERS employee with a minimum 18 months of service, they are eligible to at least file for FERS disability retirement.
Gotcha. And then I see there's another 18-month, and that has to do with the spouse of a deceased FERS employee.
Yes, if we have an employee who's covered, once again, covered by FERS, and that employee has a minimum 18 months in service and were to die in service, they're on the payroll. They're a federal employee as opposed to retiree. And that employee at the time of his or her death has at least 18 months of service, then the employee's spouse is eligible for what is called the basic employee death benefit, which is a lump sum death benefit payment. We talk about this, by the way, Dan, during our survivor benefits webinar. What's one of the webinars we do? Not every month. We do it every other month. But if an employees as well as retirees have not attended this webinar, they should really make an effort to do so, because they'll learn a lot about survivor benefits. And this is one survivor benefit that is not for a retiree, but for an employee, a FERS employee, a married FERS employee who dies in service, minimum 18 months of service.
Gotcha. Okay, so then we have a trio of 3-year milestones. And the first has to do with a new FERS employee being vested in the 1% of gross pay, which is the automatic agency contribution, correct?
Yes, and that deals with the thrift savings plan.
Okay.
A FERS employee who is hired can automatically enroll in the thrift savings plan. In fact, it is automatic. It is automatic. It used to be they had to formally enroll in the TSP, but now it's an automatic thing, and the employee can opt out. They'd be foolish to do so, but the FERS employee is automatically enrolled in the thrift savings plan and can start contributing. Now, whether the employee contributes or not, the employee always receives a 1% of their gross pay, actually their SF50 salary, each year from their agency. 1% of that annual salary. When they start contributing, though, that's when they get their own money. That's when they get what's called the agency matching contributions. This is not a matching contribution. This is an automatic 1% contribution by the agency. And if the employee continues in federal service, they continue to contribute to the TSP. After 3 years of service, of contributing to the TSP, whether they contribute or not, after 3 years of service, the employee is vested in the 1% of gross pay contribution. What do I mean by vested? Let's say the employee leaves federal service after 3 years. They decide federal service is not for them. Well, they take those 1% of gross pay contributions as well as earnings on that with them. Now, keep in mind, Dan, and many employees are not aware of this, FERS employees, that the contributions that they make from their paycheck, they're automatically invested in. They're automatically vested in those contributions. After all, it came from their paycheck as well as the earnings on that. But what many employees are not aware of is the matching contributions. A maximum match of 4% per year if the employee is contributing at least 5% of their paycheck each pay date. The employee is vested from day one on the matching contributions. They don't have to have a minimum number of years of service to keep the matching contributions. They're vested automatically. Many employees are not aware of that. But the 1% of gross pay automatic, that's a minimum 3 years of service.
Gotcha. And then I see up next under the 3-year any age heading is that they bump up to 6 hours annual leave per pay period, correct?
Yes. When an employee enters federal service, they will, and they start there. We're talking about an employee is first hired. They will start accruing 4 hours of annual leave every 2 weeks for the first 3 years. After 3 years of service, they're bumped up to 6 hours every pay period. I believe the last pay period is 10 hours. And they could be any age. Just want to point one thing out, though, that if the employee, let's say, had prior military service, active duty, or they had prior temporary time, that will be counted as far as that 3-year period is concerned.
Oh, wow.
That will count.
That's good to know. That is good to know. And you mentioned military service, and our last 3-year any age is a whopper, in my opinion. And Ed, I know you run into this. I run into this in our planning practice, which is these, oh, I wish I'd known that moment. So, folks, this is the reason you need to share this podcast with every single person in federal service. So, 3 years is the last opportunity to make a military deposit or temporary civilian service deposit without paying any interest. Correct, Ed?
That is correct, Dan. When an federal employee is hired into federal service, and let's say before they were hired, they had some active duty time,
Sure.
any branch of the service, and they're able to make a deposit for that military service. And in so doing, they will get credit both for retirement eligibility and for in the computation of their CSRS or FERS annuity. Now, what do I mean by eligibility? In order to retire from federal service, you have to have a minimum number of years of service and be at a minimum age. We're going to cover that later. But the fact of the matter is that they get credit for service time for their amount that they contribute every pay date. A portion of the paycheck goes into the CSRS or FERS retirement disability fund. They're going to get credit for service time, but they also can get credit for service time had they had prior military service or temporary time. By the way, that's also included there. Temporary time. They were a temporary employee in which they did not contribute to FERS on that time. That's the whole point. When they were on active duty, military, or they were a temporary employee, they were not contributing to any retirement system. When they're hired as a permanent employee, at that point, they can make a deposit for that active military time or temporary active duty military time, as well as temporary time. And in so doing, they get credit for that time for purposes of meeting minimum eligibility time for retiring. Now, in order to make a deposit, number one, you got to be told about it.
Sure.
Hopefully about that. Hopefully HR personnel said something about that when the person was first hired, and they have to make this deposit. The amounts are the amounts right now. I don't want to talk about the amounts, but here's the point: that whatever they owe for their military active duty military time and temporary service, if they make that deposit within the first 3 years of their hire date, they will owe no interest. No interest. If they do not complete or make any contribution for their deposit during the first 3 years, and then they find out later on. And typically, Dan, this is what I run into. Employees are not told about the fact that they can make a deposit for their active duty military time or temporary time, maybe until 10, 15 years down the road.
Absolutely.
Can they still make the deposit? Yes. Should they make the deposit? Yes. The bad news is they're going to owe interest. And it's been my experience. It is not the principle of what they have to owe, the percentage of their earnings that constitutes the deposit. It's the interest charges that hurt most people. So it's compounded over the years. So my advice is, once again, that when an employee is first hired, hopefully they're told about you have the opportunity to make a deposit for active duty military time and or temporary time. Make that deposit in full, and you could do it in installments. And as long as you complete that deposit within the first 3 years of your hire date, you will owe no interest.
Big thing here is the knowledge, folks. And that's why we're asking you, if you're listening to this, make sure you share this with people, because it may not apply to you, but it's going to apply to somebody. And if we get the word out, then more feds will be able to do it in a timely fashion. So, Ed, the next two are 5-year ones. And the first one seems pretty straightforward and also good news. And that is, at 5 years, you're vested in a CSRS or FERS pension.
Yes, after 5 years of service in which you contributed via payroll deduction a percentage of your paycheck either into the CSRS Retirement Disability Fund or the FERS Retirement Disability Fund, you are vested in the system in both in either retirement. Now, what does that mean in plain English? It means the following: if an employee after 5 years of service decides they want to leave the federal government, they want to leave federal service, and they leave their contributions in either system, in the system. They don't withdraw them because those contributions were made from the employee via payroll deduction. Those contributions they made to either retirement or is their money. But if they don't withdraw that money, they leave it in the system, then they would be eligible for what is called a deferred annuity. They'll get their annuity based on the 5 years or so of service and their high 3 average salary at age 62. I always tell employees, stick it out for 5 years. Stick it out for 5 years. If you're thinking about leaving the government, just stick it out for 5 years. Because
Gotcha.
at the very minimum, you'll get this deferred annuity starting at age 62 for the rest of your life.
No, I got you. Okay, so now our next 5-year one has to do with active duty military service in which a full deposit is made. So this is a little bit like what we were just talking about with 3 years to pay it. So what's taking place at 5 years?
After 5 years of service, an employee will add to the 5 years of service. If the employee has additional time, it's a active duty military time and or temporary time, then it's active duty military time. And the employee is thinking about making a deposit for that active duty time in order to get credit, once again, for eligibility purposes to retire. The employee must have at least 5 years of civilian service, FERS or CSRS, in order to add to that for purposes of eligibility and computation of their annuity.
Gotcha. Okay, so wow, we've got 7 milestones over the first 60 months. So we've got some big ones coming up at the 10-year mark, and the first one up is MRA plus 10. So it's 10 years, and this one does have an age with it, which is the minimum retirement age. So tell us about that.
Yes, we talk about this, Dan, once again during our monthly FERS webinars. And again, I encourage FERS employees, if they have not attended one of our FERS monthly webinars, please do so. In fact, the next one's going to be next week. I think it's going to be on June the 6th. At any rate, what is this? What is this MRA plus 10 immediate retirement? If a FERS employee has reached what's called their minimum retirement age, MRA. What is minimum retirement age? Depends what year you were born, but generally it's any age between age 55 to 57, depending, again, what year you were born. Just give an example. If you were born between 1953 and 1964, your minimum retirement age is 56 years old. If you're born in 1965, it's 56 years and 2 months. By the time you get to age 7, if you're born in 1970 or later, it's age 57. This is a basic summary of what MRA is. Anyhow, let's suppose an employee has reached that minimum retirement age. And they have between 10 and 19 years of service. At least 10, but fewer than 20. That's what I'm saying. And the employee says, I'm really not happy in my job. Maybe I found a better job on the outside. I really would love to retire now. Well, in order to retire at your MRA, you have to have at least 30 years of service. Well, what happens here? The employee only has between 10 and 19 years of service. Is it possible that they could retire with fewer than 30 years of service? The answer is yes. It's called the MRA plus 10. MRA plus 10. The only downside with this immediate retirement, Dan, is because the employee does, in fact, have less than 30 years of service. their annuity is going to be reduced, because they retired before age 62. They really would have had to really work until age 62 in order to get what's called an immediate unreduced FERS retirement, but they didn't. They retired before that. So therefore, if they retire at their MRA, or maybe at age 50, 58, 59, for every year they're under age 62, their annuity is going to be reduced by 5%. 5% per year, permanent reduction.
Gotcha.
Once again, Dan, this gives FERS employees a little more, leeway as far as their federal FERS employees for their federal service. They can retire earlier than expected. They don't have to work the full 30 years, but it does come at a downside. But they must have at least 10 years of federal service, of which 5 have to be civilian. We were talking a few moments ago about this, the military service. You could apply 5 years towards the 10 years, meaning that the employee would have to have at least 5 years of civilian service.
Gotcha. And so, well, in keeping with this 10-year, and this is 10 years in any age in this particular case, if a FERS covered merit employee passes away, there's now a survivorship, correct?
Yes. In order for a FERS employee who is married and who dies in service, we talked about the basic employee death benefit a few moments ago. They have to have a minimum 18 months of, 18 months of service. But if that employee had at least 10 years of service at the time of his or her death, then the surviving spouse will be automatically entitled to what's called a survivor annuity, based on the number of years of service they had. That's how it's computed. And the deceased employee's high 3 average salary, including unused sick leave at the time of his or her death.
Gotcha. So next we move out to 15 years. And this one is more of an annual leave thing. So now we're bumping up. We crossed over to where we're getting 6 hours per pay period. Now we're jumping up to 8, correct?
That's correct. Now we're going up to 8 hours of annual leave. Once an employee reaches 15 years of service, they will accrue 8 hours of annual leave every 2 weeks.
Awesome. All right. So up next, we're back to a 20. We've got a 20-year number, but we're back to the MRA. So talk us through that, Ed.
Yes, Dan. This is called the MRA plus 20. Immediate retirement. Dan, I cannot tell you the number of questions, I will tell you, disagreements I get about this one.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the MRA plus 20 immediate retirement is not written up in the OPM CSRS and FERS manual. It's not written up. There's very little in there about this. But here's the situation with the MRA plus 20 immediate retirement. An employee has reached his or her MRA, just like we talked about the MRA plus 10. But an employee has between 20 and 29 years of service. Mm-hmm. With the MRA plus 10, between 10 and 19, between 10 and 19 years of service. MRA plus 20, between 20 and 29 years of service, and the employee would like to retire immediately. They can, just like the MRA plus 10. Here's the difference. The difference is, for every year the employee is under age 60, not 62, their annuity is going to be reduced by 5% per year. So, for example, an employee, let's say a FERS employee, has 22 years of service. They're age 58. They want to retire immediately. Their annuity will be reduced 2 years times 5% per year, because that's 2 years under age 60, 10%, not Gotcha. 20%. Dan, I came across in the OPM application an OPR, the application for what's called postponed retirement. Something very interesting. It says on that application that if you are applying for your annuity under a postponed retirement, and that's what some employees do, they retire they leave federal service at their MRA with at least 10 years of service, between 10 and 19 or 20 and 29, and then they postpone the start of their annuity until, in the case of MRA plus 10, to 62, in the case of the MRA plus 20, until 60. Thereby, if their annuity starts at those ages, their annuity won't be reduced. It says that specifically on the application. The application is for OPM form RI 92-19. There's your proof.
Gotcha.
Anybody who wants to disagree with me, fine, go look on that application. You'll see that. It says that specifically on the application that there's no reduction under the MRA plus 20 if the departed employee applies for annuity starting at age 60. Read for yourself.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're still in the 20 years, but now we've got an age attached to it, which is age 50. So 20 years and age 50. This is an eligibility regarding VERA and VSIP. So tell us about that.
Yes. If an agency is having, let's say, budget problems, and they would like to offer early retirement to eligible employees, what type of early retirement talking about? A VERA, which stands for a Voluntary Early Retirement Authority. That's no buyout. There's no buyout. I call buyout severance pay. That's what they are. Or they could be offering a buyout, and that would be through what's called a VSIP, Voluntary Separation Incentive Program, in which the departed employee is given anywhere from $25,000 to $40,000 of a buyout. And the reason I call it severance pay, because Dan, it's fully taxable. It's an enhanced paycheck in which they take out all the taxes. It's fully taxable. Therefore, it is a severance pay. Well, anyhow, the following employees would be eligible to under VERA, a VRAA or VSIP, to retire immediately, start receiving their annuity under the following eligibility requirements. One, the employee who has at least 25 years of service could retire at any age.
Mm-hmm.
If the employee has between 20 and 25 years of service, they have to be a minimum age 50. 50. That's under a VERA VSIP.
Gotcha. Okay, so next couple in this article don't have years or months of service associated with them, but they're specifically ages. And they both relate to the Federal Employee Group Life Insurance Program. The first one, I'll guarantee you, people miss and don't know this. And that is between 35 and 45. What happens with FEGLI basic insurance? So that's that first multiple. Okay.
So the FEGLI life insurance program has two parts. Basically, the first one's called the basic insurance amount, which is an employee's SF50 salary adjusted somewhat upward. And you have the optional coverage. Right now, we're talking about the basic insurance amount. So an employee who's enrolled in the FEGLI basic, they will get twice the amount I should say the beneficiaries of the policy they name will get twice the amount of their FEGLI basic if they die before their age 35. Age 35. It's called the multiple. So they would get twice that amount of theirs if they die before age 35. Starting at age 35, that double amount it's reduced by 10% per year. And so after 10 years, in other words, the employee who dies at age 45, their beneficiary would get just the basic insurance amount, not the double amount. It phases out 10% per year over 10 years.
Gotcha. And that does get missed, Ed, because I I do meet a fair number of people that will be telling me, oh, my basic's 2 times. And yes, it was, but after age 45, not any longer. So the second big milestone for FEGLI that we identify here is age 50, and this really relates to FEGLI option B. Now, FEGLI option B increases in cost every 5 years, but something happens at 50. Talk about that, Ed.
Option B, the cost of option B really starts going up significantly. It's starting when it's age 50. Those 5-year bands, by the time they get 55, and I think it just about doubles in cost. And it after age 60 and age 70 really goes up. So employees should who are enrolled in option B, FEGLI option B, should really, right, when they reach age 50, ask themselves, do I really need option B? Do I really need this? Because once again, when they enrolled in it, when they were younger, they probably needed it. Maybe they bought a house, they had a young family, they want to have more life insurance coverage. But now, when they reach age 50, maybe the mortgage is paid off. Children, loved ones, the children, or maybe on their own. Maybe the person can afford to at least reduce the amount of their multiples of their salary. That's what option B is, or maybe get rid of it altogether. Keep in mind that when it comes to reducing one's FEGLI coverage, I'm talking about, in this case, option B, or getting rid of it. You can do that at any time.
Sure.
I also recommend, though, that employees who are unsure about their life insurance needs, they should talk to a licensed, licensed life insurance broker, and talk about, if they could do better on the outside, if they really need this much amount of life insurance. Don't make this decision in a vacuum. Maybe work with a professional in order to really understand what you really need in terms of life insurance coverage.
And that is so important, Ed. The big thing about it is a lot of times I don't think feds realize that they don't have to go it alone on everything, and there are people, places, everything else that you can go and get help. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
Sometimes we get this rugged individualist mentality. Now, one of the things that we try and do at Serving Those Who Serve, and Ed is central to this, is we try and write and put a lot of stuff out there. So if you are absolutely the most rugged do-it-yourselfer ever, God bless you, that's great. Come to our website, it's there. Okay, you can search the whole internet, and that'll take you a bit of time. We're doing our level best to have it all in one place for you, at least, if you want to look this kind of stuff up, so that you are familiar with it, so you can make the best decisions possible. Well, folks, we're coming up close to the halfway point on this big list of milestones. So this next one is one that's very special to Ed and I, and it's going to be very special to a certain group of our people. And at the risk of excess alliteration, it is for special provisions employees, and that is with 20 years and age 50. So tell us about that one, Ed.
Special provision employees, who include law enforcement officers, firefighters, air traffic controllers, and Custom and Border Control border officers, CBO. And they're sort of in the news in recent years, especially Custom and Borders, with what's going on with down there in Texas and so on. They got a lot of permission. They can retire with 20 years of such service at age 50. Now, when I say retire, they get their annuity. And the question comes up, what about the rest of their benefits, like TSP? Can they start drawing their TSP? Well, it used to be, this is until the year 2014, a special provision employee could not take their traditional TSP right away. They had to wait till 59 and a half. The general rule when it comes to the traditional TSP is an employee can make penalty-free withdrawals from their traditional TSP if they retire sometime during or after the year they turn 55. Here, we're talking about retiring at age 50. Well, in 2014, Congress passed a law, I think it was called the National Defense Act, something like that, that said that special forces employees, if they retire at age 50 with a minimum 20 years of service, they can make penalty-free withdrawals from their traditional TSP. They don't have to wait till 59 and a half. So,
Gotcha. So, that's a great, a great benefit for the special provisions folks. And sort of on the heels of that, there's one more having to do with 20 years, and it's with age 55. So tell us about that one.
yes, employees who retire, we're talking about CSRS or FERS employees, and they've reached the age of 55. They can make penalty-free withdrawals, no 10% on withdrawal penalty, provided that they retire sometime during or after sometime during the year they are at age 55. Now, under CSRS or FERS, they can retire for 30 years of service without having to go through an early retirement. They can retire at age 55 with a minimum 30 years of service and make penalty-free withdrawals. I have to emphasize once again, this is the traditional TSP, not the raw TSP, the traditional TSP. The raw TSP is age 59 and a half. Let me just say one other thing about this, that if you take something like a 401k plan, which is what the TSP is, it's made up, it has many similarities as a 401k plan that let's say a private employer offers. There is a similar rule that when an employee retires from private industry and they want to take money out of their 401k plan, they can do so if they reach their 55th birthday. They retire, let's say, during the year they turn 55. They can start making withdrawals from their 401k plan and not pay a 10% on withdrawal penalty. But here's the difference, Dan. With the TSP says you can make penalty-free withdrawals from your traditional TSP during the year that you turn 55. Let's say you retire from federal service on April the 30th, and you're going to turn 55 years old in November. Right away when you retire, you could take money out of penalty-free withdrawals from your traditional TSP, starting, let's say, in May, June, July. That would not be the case in private industry with a 401k plan. In private industry, you retire from private industry on April 30th, and you're going to turn 55 in November. You're going to have to wait until age 55, until you reach 55 to start taking the money out. So that's a subtle difference here, between TSP and a 401k plan.
Gotcha. And Ed, let's squeeze one more into this podcast, because remember, folks, this is a two-parter. So be sure to come back for the second one, because there's some really juicy stuff there. So I think we squeeze one more in on this one, and that has to do with, again, 20 years, but now age 60. Okay, what does that mean for a 60-year-old person who has at least 20 years?
And I want to emphasize this is either CSRS or FERS, Dan. Either CSRS or FERS.
Yep.
An employee can retire under what's called an immediate retirement. Immediate retirement means they get their first of lifetime annuity checks starting the month after they retire, the month after, the first day of the month after they retire. And the annuity check will be unreduced. It's a full annuity check.
That is good news. Okay, awesome. All right, folks, we're a little bit over halfway on our list of milestones. So we're going to break it here because the next chunk is pretty juicy. And you will not want to miss this because we are going to kick it off. Here's your hint. We're going to tell you about a milestone that if you're a FERS employee is going to bump your pension by 10% for life. And we'll have a whole bunch more beyond that. So do not miss the next episode. Ed, this has been great. As you know, I was really excited as we worked through, creating this list, and you've done a fantastic job on that. You're really bringing it to life in the podcast. So as always, I thank you for what you do for us and for the federal community, especially how you raise the level of education at serving those who serve. So thank you for that, Ed.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And folks, that's a wrap. We will see you at the next podcast. Be sure to grab it. Do not miss it. We are Serving Those Who Serve. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on our YouTube channel and Spotify. Please remember to share it in general with your friends and neighbors. Don't forget to share this one with everybody. I mean everybody. Check us out on Twitter and LinkedIn. Don't forget those live webinars every week that Ed mentioned. Go to stwserve.com. You will see the webinars button. Go ahead and click it, and you'll get our whole menu. The guru will come to you. Reach you where you are, teach you where you are, serve you where you are. So, folks, that is a wrap. But be sure to share all of this with your friends. They will thank you. Be sure to read Ed every week in the Fed Zone. That's blog.stwserve.com and also at fed-zone.com. Be sure to sign up for the weekly serving. Ed and the rest of the Fed stars from SW Serve will be bringing their best to you each week. So for Ed, the crew at Serving Those Who Serve, and me, Dan Sipe, good luck, Godspeed, and above all, remember, it is your Fed life. Make it a great one because you deserve it. Stay well, everybody. We are out.
Thank you for listening to the FedLife podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Serving Those Who Serve or Raymond James. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Securities offered through Raymond James Financial Services Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors Incorporated. Serving Those Who Serve is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services.
Raymond James is not affiliated and does not endorse the opinions or services of any of the quoted professionals or their respective firms. Any opinions are those of Dan Sipe and not necessarily those of RJFS or Raymond James. This case study is for illustrative purposes only. Individual cases will vary. Raymond James is not affiliated with and does not endorse the opinions or services of the quoted professionals or their respective organizations.
Neither Raymond James Financial Services nor any Raymond James financial advisor renders advice on tax issues. These matters should be discussed with the appropriate professional. Investing involves risk, and you may incur a profit or loss regardless of strategy selected, including diversification and asset allocation.